Shultz. I just want to take a moment and just introduce myself to you for those of you who don't know me. My name is Rob Hall. I'm running for State School Board District 3. This is my wife, Jeannie, on the front row. Would you stand, please? I know she wasn't prepared for me to do that. I'm the father of 5. We've got 2 beautiful grandchildren, 2 as well. For the past 25 years, I've been a youth pastor, working with young people, working with teenagers, and basically teens up to about 30 years old, mentoring them too as well, also as a teacher for 10 years. And currently I'm an honorary wing commander for the 380 Fighter Wing on Hill Air Force Base, serving specifically with the 421 FGS Fighter Wing, the Black Widows. And so I work with 18 to 25-year-olds up there on the base too as well. I'm also a chaplain for the Salt Lake City Police Department. And I'm praying for the opportunity to be able to serve the families of the state of Utah on the Utah State School Board. So real quick, I just want to cover a few things with you guys. The dysfunction and moral decay of our school system, it's no secret. And the attack on, from the attack on the child-parent relationship to the war on parental rights, I think we find ourselves in a place in the state of Utah that we've never been before. And I hope you don't mind this, but I do want to read a couple of verses to you here today, if you don't mind. Nehemiah chapter number 4, verse 14 says this, "And I looked and rose up and said unto the nobles and to the rulers and to the rest of the people, Be not ye afraid of them. Remember the Lord, which is great and terrible, and fight for your brethren, your sons, and your daughters, your wives, and your houses." There's never been a time that it's more pertinent, it's more crucial that we fight. And it says here to fight for your brethren, and fight for your sons, and fight for your daughters, and fight for your wives and your houses. Now I want to challenge us as people, as Americans, that we need to stand up, we need to fight with our voice, we need to fight with our vote, and we need to fight with our presence. Now, specifically concerning parents, Proverbs 22:6 says this, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he'll not depart from it." So it gives a specific mandate to parents to educate and to train up our children. In Psalms 147, it says this is a great verse, "As arrows in the hand of a mighty man, so are children of the youth." And so just kind of picture this, if you would, in your mind. We have this responsibility as parents to give a good launch to our young people. Now, we know the bullseye's straight ahead, but that doesn't always mean that they're going to stay on track, but it's our job as parents to give them a good launch. And so, with that being said, the mandate to raise and educate our children was given by God. The government didn't give that to us, God gave that to us. And so I want you to know we live in a state, and those of you that have heard me speak, I always want to share this because I think knowledge is power. When people know their rights and understand their rights, it empowers you to do so much more. But Utah state law says this, that parents are a child's first teachers and are responsible for the education of their children. It goes on to say this, "And to provide for the effective participation of parents in establishing and implementing educational goals." Now think about this. This is supposed to be the job of parents according to the law. In establishing and implementing educational goals for their respective schools and students. It says, "And to include parents in establishing and implementing educational goals and participating in decision-making at the school site." At the school site. That's supposed to be the job of parents. And so the selection of education programs in the state of Utah was never designed to be done without the informed consent of parents. Right. It was always supposed to be that way. And so because it was not done that way, or has not been done that way, or hasn't continued to be done that way, many, many things has made its way into our Utah schools, such as, sensitive materials, even critical race theory under the guise of equity and inclusion. And I know that these are bills that were passed in the House, in the Senate this year. I'm very grateful for, but those things still need to be implemented because a lot of these things are still in our schools today. And these things have covertly and deceitfully infiltrated our schools. Stewardship is this. Stewardship is the management of another's affairs. That's what it is. So when I drop my child off at school, all of a sudden that school becomes a steward. It's the management of another's affairs, okay? So when it comes time for me to give an account of how my kids were raised or how they were educated because the mandate's given to me, the system's not going to do that. That's going to be my job. So as a parent, it's my job to hold the system accountable for what's being taught in the schools. And so this is very, very important. Just a little bit about how things work. The legislator draws up laws, and of course those things come down to the school board. They draft the rules, policies, and they make their way down to LEAs, and they create kind of a guardrail, right? But they, you want to have, autonomy, and you want to have local control, and so you have county school districts, and then those things are implemented into schools. But I heard a state school board member say the other day in a debate, he said this, and I quote, he said this: "I don't know what your districts are doing. I don't know." So my question is this: who knows? Who knows what the districts are doing? Who knows what's being taught in the classrooms? Who knows what's really going on? And so here's the solution. We can either have more government oversight, or we can do God's plan, and we can, as parents, actively get involved and engage in our schools once again. And that's what my prayer is, that parents would step out in a way like never before and get involved and get plugged into schools. You say, well, Rod, that's pie in the sky type stuff. That's not going to happen. Let me tell you this, it's already happening. Since we've been on the campaign trail, I've been receiving email after email after email from parents that have said, you know what, we're going to step in and we're going to do that. We're going to go to our schools, we're going to ask these questions. We're going to find out about what's going on in the classroom. We're going to find out about SEL. We're going to ask about this paper that was sent home that looks like it's got some critical race theory. We're going to find out what's going on within the walls of that school. And those things are so important. And so I want to say this, and this might sound, I don't know what it'll sound like to you, but the only way to hold the system accountable is through parental engagement and parental involvement. It's the only way it's going to happen. It's the only way that you can keep an eye on hundreds of thousands of young people in classrooms all across the state of Utah. And so I want to say this. I want to make sure I don't take anything away from teachers. We have some tremendous teachers in our state. But they need the support of parents, and they need the support of staff. And to help empower them to do what they're passionate about, which is to actually just teach the subjects that they love. It's important. We need to empower them to command the respect necessary to create an environment in the classroom that is not just safe, but is suitable for learning at the highest level. And as we've been a part of this process, we've had many teachers come to us. I'll tell you about one just a couple weeks ago. She was frustrated. She's ready to quit. She's ready to be done. She said, Rod, you don't understand. She's 2 years in. 2 years in. She said, you don't understand. The environment is out of control. And the behavior, and I don't feel like I have the support of staff, all these different things. And so our teachers, we need to empower them to command the respect that is necessary to create an environment in the classroom that is safe and suitable for learning at the highest level. We need to focus on academics. We need to focus on raising the bar in the classroom, on educating instead of indoctrinating, spending all the time trying to indoctrinate, focus on education. And building character with a call to excellence, and building resilience by challenging young people once again to achieve their highest potential through good old-fashioned hard work. And so people that would say this doesn't work, I want to tell you a quick story. My son goes to Syracuse High School, plays football for the Syracuse High School team. And, we were all really worried about their team this year. A lot of their good players that went on, and it just doesn't look like they're going to have much of a team. Well, Coach Tulane is his name. You ought to look him up. He's a great coach. He's a young coach. He stepped in and he took control of this team. And the workouts went from halfway workouts to over the top. I mean, the kid is in great shape, and he was throwing up in practice. And I'm like, you know what I mean? The good stuff. Hard work. You say, well, I don't like that. That seems, no, you know what it did? It challenged the kids. And the coach said this, you know what, we're going to take the GPA from 2.0 to 2.5. He thought, well, you might think, well, maybe some kids ran from that. No, it elevated every single one of those kids. And guess what? They have a 3.4 GPA accumulative, like the team as a whole. Everybody rose to that. So young people need to be challenged, man. We think we need to bring the standard down. We need to make it easy. No, we need to challenge them. They need the challenge, and many of them want the challenge along the way. And by God's grace, I'm going to fight with and for parents and for teachers to see these things come to pass. It's been my mission from day one to help preserve and protect the hearts and minds of young people. That's what I've done for the last 25 years of my life. And many of you have heard me say this before. What goes into the mind impacts the heart. What impacts the heart comes out in a person's life. And That's not something I just made up, okay? I've been quoted for that. I didn't just make that up. It comes from a biblical principle where it says this: keep thy heart, or protect thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. What I allow to come in impacts my heart. What impacts my heart comes out of my life. And you know, people that have a desire to tear down the moral fabric of our country, they know this as well. And there's an all-out attack to bring things into our school system that should not be there, to gain access to the hearts of our young people, and steer them in directions they should not go. And so it's important that we protect that. We protect those hearts that are pliable and vulnerable and precious. We protect them. So moving forward, you know, obviously we need to probably work with some policy on the board and reevaluate some standards, and I'm really careful with that because I don't understand whose standards they really are. And this is, you know, and I need to dive in deeper. Are they our standards, or are Utah standards, or are they Common Core standards? Do they belong to us, or the copywritten? I don't really know, but I know there's some things that need to be done, and I believe that we have some people that are hungry to do that. I think there's some great people on the board right now that are trying to do those things, but you need some harmony to be able to do that, to move forward with these things on the board. So I do want you to know there's 7 seats that are up for re-election on the board right now, on a 15-panel board, and we're praying that God will give a strong majority so we can see some things move forward and change and be transformed in our school systems. I think God's not done with Utah. There's a great work that he still wants to do here. But my earnest prayer is this: that parents all across the state would awaken and take their place. They would understand this thing is not going to turn around without parental engagement and parental involvement here in the state of Utah. So I'm challenging parents to get informed, to get involved. We have a lady here that works in the PTA in her school. I'm sure she would love to have a lot of parents jump into that. We've got community council meetings where people can get involved, and we need parents to plug in and to get involved. And listen, not to go with a bunch of scrutiny with our teachers, but with the idea where we can support them anywhere that we can, and to get involved and to plug in and be a part of what I believe is supposed to happen here in the state of Utah. And so once again, I do want to encourage you with this. As we are entering this voting season, to vote for people that stand for the things that made this country great. Vote for people that stand for truth, that stand for right. And I think it's important that we make that statement. Truth is not, it's not relative. It's absolute. It's the same truth that our Constitution was built on. And so we're talking about God's truth. I wanted to read you this quote very quickly, if I could, from John Adams. Says this: John Adams said this: "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Morality and virtue are the foundation of our republic and necessary for a society to be free." But I think we got to get back to the basics. I think we have to get back to what's most important. I think we don't need to be afraid to speak out and to say things that need to be said that are right and that are true. And we need to fight for our kids here in the state of Utah. So with God's help, that's exactly what I want to do. Hey guys, this is Jenny Earl. She's on the state school board right now.
This is my question, because I've listened to a couple of debates where they've asked people about, will you compromise? I have a different question. It's along the same line though. How are you going to work with others in order to actually get something passed that you're interested in? Specifically, you'll need 8 votes, right? You've got to have 8 votes to get anything passed. You can talk all you want, but until you do that, it doesn't. So tell me how you're going to do that.
Well, we're going to eat together, number one. It's amazing what you can accomplish when you sit down and break bread together, you know. I think if you don't formulate a relationship where you can sit down and across the table and have a conversation, you're missing out, you know. So I don't know how else you do that. I don't know how else you work together unless you come together. And so I literally said this to my wife. I'm like, honey, just be ready for barbecues, for get-togethers, because that's the only way we're going to build a cohesive board, right? To be able to work together and work through some of our differences and talk about those things. And I think that's the key. In order to be able to work together, you have to come together. So that'll be my very first goal. Come on. Schultz, before the questions start flying in, let's give
You are in the hot seat, Ron. No, yeah.
I'm too short for that. Okay. Is it okay if I make some comments and ask a question?
Yes.
This helps that Speaker Shultz is here too. Okay, so I'm the one that Rod Hall mentioned. I am a parent and PTA president at my children's school. It's a Title I public school, so low income, right? I also volunteer probably 5 to 10 hours a week in addition to all the other things. So, and I came because I'm very invested in education. I might plan to run for the Weber School Board whenever the seat is up in my region, which I believe is in 4 years. I missed the deadline this year. Okay, so you mentioned, okay, I'm gonna kind of go backwards because I do have my question, which you can think about then is, how do you know what's going on in you were saying as parents, we need to know what's going on in our school districts, right? And in the schools, I will say, I wanted to raise my hand when you said that. I know, I go to all the school board meetings. I'm at the school all the time. So I will say, again, it's an elementary school. So I'm less aware of secondary. I will say I don't see the indoctrination that we're talking about. I see that teachers can't even get kids to sit down and listen. I think what I'm seeing and talking with people about is teachers I think education is being over-legislated. They have too much already going on, and then we're adding so much to their plates. I think we need less government legislation. I have ideas on how to elevate teachers in schools and school districts. I have data to back up my ideas from people that have done the research. And I also, I love what you're saying about parental involvement. I think that's so important. That's what I do, but I don't think it's always as easy as maybe it sounded that you were implying. Again, our area is low income. Parents are really busy. If you know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, they're down at the bottom trying to survive. They can't always climb up. I can. That's why I tend to be the parent that's at the school the most. Because I have all my basic needs met, all those things. So for me, I'm also we need more ways to help parents and maybe recognizing and being able to get into the schools because they're really just trying to survive, just getting their kids to survive. But I'm sure I'll have more to say later. I'm so sorry. You're welcome, I'm sorry. But yeah, how do you then, if you're saying we need to know, I know what's going on in my district, how do you know what's going on in your district and in your schools?
I think what you're saying is 100% correct when it comes to parents and more involvement. So just, and
I am a conservative, by the way. I'm registered Republican, and even though it may
good.
not seem like it.
No, that's good. Yes, absolutely. So the whole issue of parents getting involved, you're right. It's something that's going to take some time, right? We're going to plant these seeds, we're going to water them, and we hope to see a great harvest. So we have Speaker Shultz here. I've already met with President of the Senate, Stuart Adams, and I spoke with Burgess Owens about this too as well. And so this is I believe we have an epidemic of lack of parental involvement in our state. I think it's in proportions like never before. And so I don't think you can start overnight. I met with Ben Nadowski, which is the mayor of Ogden, to talk about some of these very things. We talked about this, and I think it has to come through churches, through community. We've got to start there. We've got to plant those seeds. We need to create tools and teach parents, what they don't know or what they would want to know, and help empower them to take these steps that we're talking about. So, community council meeting to answer your questions. Also, just engaging with our kids to find out on a day-to-day basis what's going on in class, what's going on in school, what have you heard, what's happening. Those things are very, very important. Sometimes our kids walk in the door, and to be honest with you, I think many parents have, and listen, we've probably been guilty of this in the past too as well. where we just have taken a back seat and we trusted that everything was A-okay in the schools. We've given responsibility to the schools that were probably a parental responsibility and trusted that everything was going to be all right. And the truth of the matter is it's not. And I think more and more parents are awakening to that, to step in and be involved. So we need to find ways to help empower them to take the places they need to take. So.
How do I turn this
Just
on?
yeah, there's a switch.
There we go. Can you hear me? Maybe. Oh. There we go. First off, thank you for allowing me to be here with you today. Jamie, thank you for the invite. Rod, thank you for the invite. For those of you that don't know me, I represent District 12, House District 12. My name is Mike Shultz, and I was elected Speaker of the House in November of last year. And so it's been an honor for me to have the opportunity to serve and give back to this community and go and work hard and fight for good, solid conservative values. And that's a priority that I think is really important. That's a really good question. I apologize, I missed your name. I can tell you the number one way I find out what's happening in my schools and in my area is my wife. Okay, because every mom calls her. And so there isn't anything that happens, I think, in the schools in my district that my wife doesn't find out about. And she's been a really good resource, honestly, and staying involved with the other moms and parents. I mean, that's what they do day in and day out. I have 2 kids currently in public schools, one at Rocky Mountain Junior High, one at Upper Elementary. But I also think it's important for those that represent you to get out and visit schools and be part of it and understand, have conversations with the teachers, with the principals, see firsthand what's happening. That's something that's important to me. And then also have a good working relationship with the school board. That is really important. And it's important that the school board members are doing the same thing and understanding what's happening in their school. I'll say this, we are very fortunate in Weber County. We have pretty good schools and a pretty good school district here. That's not to say it's not perfect and there isn't things that need to be worked on, but I'm not going to name names, but you look across the state and not all school districts are created equal and not all put the same policies in place. And so that's where you see a lot of the concerns come to the legislature is from some of those other school districts. As I've had the opportunity to go sit around and talk with school board members, talk with superintendents, one of the things that I say I think is really important, if you guys can work to police yourselves and put pressure on the bad actors, we will get better outcomes and less legislation at the state level. Because the legislation at the state level there are real concerns that come out, that come and in front of us, and they're driven by constituents, and they're driven by parents, and those that have seen things firsthand. And we as elected officials need to recognize that and understand that, and I think it's important for the school districts to also recognize that. And so I think it's really important that you have a school board that works together, works collaboratively with the legislature, and I think that's the #1 best way you can get the best outcomes that will be best for the schools as well as the students and the parents.
Okay, I'm not, can you hear me? Nope. It's on.
Did you turn the other on?
Yeah.
You can just put this one over here. Okay, Mike will fix it. Speaker will fix it. Okay, so we have done, and I don't know what has been said, but as a legislature, so student growth on average in the state of Utah is growing less than 4% over the last few years, and that is actually trending downward significantly. But we, as a legislature, have increased funding 54% in the last 4 years, including 2024, which is a huge increase in funding. Obviously, that helps schools, it supports teachers. That is unprecedented in my time in the legislature, and I think probably Representative or Speaker Shultz as well.
We passed a bill this year to get rid of all academic school fees. So families that are struggling every fall when they go to register their kids, now they do not have to pay thousands of dollars in school fees just for Johnny or Susie to go and take academic classes. That's what the school's supposed to be providing, that we shouldn't be charging parents fees to be able to take those classes. So the legislature did that. The legislature created a stipend for teachers so that when they're doing their student teaching, they'll be able to be paid like an internship. There's no such thing as free internships anymore. So we need to treat our teachers right, and that's what this legislature is doing. This is a very conservative legislature, but we care about our schools and we care about our teachers, and we are putting our money where our mouths are. And I think sometimes it's a problem because teachers are told something else, right? The messaging doesn't come from us usually. It comes from the union or it comes from other sources, and they are saying things that are actually oftentimes not true or very slanted in a specific way. And so I just want you to know, every legislator I serve with, and Mike and I both serve in leadership in the House, and we get to know our legislators. Every single House member and every single Senate member cares about teachers, about students, and about schools. So let's just put that right out on the table. And I know that Rod Hall feels the same way, and that's why I'm supporting him in his run for the state board. So that, I think, is really important that we understand. And I'm happy to answer any questions about the bills that we've run, but hopefully that just is an overview. I don't know what was said before I got here, and I apologize for being late, and I'm super grateful to be here as well.
So Ethan or Tanner, we're going to alternate asking a few questions, both of our organizations, and then we'll open it up to everyone else to ask whatever questions you would like to ask. So I'll start, and then Utah Empowerment Initiative can take the next question. So my initial question is, this partisan board is relatively new to Utah. And there's been, little hiccups here and there, but I think it's a really good law that was initiated by our legislators. But there's already some pushback and of talking about changing it back to where it was. So I'd like to know, first, we'll start with Rod, of what your feeling is on it being a partisan election, and then Speaker Shultz, and then Karianne.
I think it's important that you know where people stand and how they align. I think when you have a nonpartisan board, you have no idea. A person can literally just say whatever they want to and gain access to the office and then do whatever they want to. But if you've been aligned with, specifically with the party especially for a good amount of time, you kind of know that person and where they stand and how the party aligns, and it helps you better to know if you're going to be able to support decisions that they would make.
So when I first came into the legislature 9 years ago, we did not have partisan school board elections. We fought really hard to get partisan school board elections. It's a simple answer for me. We will continue to have partisan school board elections. It's important, and there's always some infighting, and as things transition, there's certainly those that don't like those transitions, but we're moving in that direction. I truly think it's going to get better. I'm confident that it's going to get better, like Rod said, I think as you're voting, you want to know that you're voting for people that align with the same values as what you have. That is important to me.
Thank you. I agree that partisan school board elections are very important. However, I don't think that that's the final step that we can take as we vet candidates. Just if you have an R after your name or a D after your name, people should be asking questions, learning about the individual, what they stand for, what they want to do when they're in office. I personally prefer that when my constituents do that with me and they ask me the hard questions. It really makes me think, and that's what's so important about our process in the United States of America and in Utah, is really getting to know the individuals who are running for office. We're talking in a primary right now, right? That's 2 R's. but there's a vast difference in these candidates. And so just would ask everybody, even though we do have partisan elections and they are important, let's make sure that we also ask the questions of the candidates.
Thank you guys for coming out. I appreciate it. My question is this. Gen Alpha is being referred to as the broken generation or the ruined generation. I talked about this with Rod a little bit, but what can the state school board and what can our legislators do to make sure that we can bolster Gen Alpha and make sure they don't end up the ruined generation?
So I work specifically with Gen Alpha on a day-to-day basis, and you're right, they're being called the weakest generation, the saddest generation. I think that we have got to begin to speak life into this generation. There's so much that is being brought that is being discussed on a daily basis that brings people down and doesn't elevate people. I've got a survey here that was given in Davis County School District, and the whole thing is about race. I want to give you a little bit about my background. I've grown up here. I've been here for most of my life since I was 10 years old. And this is not a racist place. I don't care what anybody tries to tell you, this is not a racist place. I've been to places where I had sugar poured in my gas tank. And this is not a racist place. This is a beautiful place. And to continually put it before the kids that there might be something wrong, that creates the division. To always talk about being anxious and always talk about being depressed and always talk, those things we're not speaking life. And I think that we have young people that are capable of so much more. I gave you the illustration earlier about the football team. Sometimes they need to be challenged and they need to be have something brought into their life that brings about something that would pull some drive out of them, and that's what we need. And so for me, I'm going to be working in both places at the same time, right? If the Lord allows me on the state school board, but we've got to find different creative ways to be able to speak life into these kids again, or we will. We'll see this generation be lost. They say that 25 is the new 18, right? Some people say that 30 is the new 18. Not to be the case. And so let me just go back to, I feel like because a lot of these issues we've created, just being honest, because we've given them everything. We've given this generation things that we didn't want them to not have anything, so we've handed it to them. I think we're going to have to come alongside and give them a hand up. I didn't say a hand out. I said a hand up and help them through this process to get to the next level. I'll tell you some of the things we've done with our young people. There's a lot of jobs available, right? We just did this. We had the depot come in from the base. They presented all these amazing jobs. We're talking about 18-year-olds, some kids getting ready to graduate out of high school. And we thought, man, this is great. We presented these great opportunities. We've given them a great opportunity to launch, and they did nothing with it. And I realized they need help filling out the application. They need help putting together a resume. They need help being walked through the process. And so I know that sounds weak, but that's where they are. I think we need to step in and give them a hand up and walk them through the process. Working with a young man specifically right now from Northridge High School, he's never driven a car, and he doesn't have anybody to take him to do that. And so as a community, I think we live in a place that is that's done amazing at giving, right? But what about giving our time? What about investing? And I think we've got to step up as a community and really invest in these young people in a way like never before. I think we can see improvement.
I just echo what Rod has said, and he said it a lot better than I probably could have. But I think a couple things. We can't feed into this, right? I mean, we got to have accountability. We got to teach our kids that there's consequences for their actions. Right. This not having consequences for your actions is a problem. And just because maybe some parents aren't teaching that doesn't mean that we should say that's okay in our schools, because we shouldn't. When I went to school, when you all went to school, there were consequences for our actions. I was suspended at one point in time. Okay, I'll be the first one to admit it. That taught me that the choices we make have consequences. That has to happen. One of the things that I'm proud that the legislature has done is we push back on some of these most egregious things, the DEI stuff. Rod talked a little bit about that. The bathroom privacy bill. I'm sorry if you're a biological male, you use a biological male bathroom. It's again, we're making choices here, right? We're teaching our kids choices. Puberty blockers, we fixed that a couple of years ago for our kids. Gender reassignment surgery for kids under the age of 18. Like, at what point in time did society think that this is okay? And so we've got to get back to our choices have consequences. And even though, and I agree, that a lot of this isn't happening at homes, but that doesn't make it okay to happen at our schools. And so I think find that balance to make sure that we get back to the decisions we make have consequences, and teaching the values as important.
Those are great answers. I think a lot of what was talked about, the DEI, the transgender issues, the constant access to cell phones, our generation Alpha has been raised with kind of a fixed mindset. If you know social science theory, there's a huge issue with our young people, and part of it is they just have a fixed mindset, and we really need to help them have that growth mindset that Rod talked about and learn that they can do for themselves, and also what Speaker Shultz talked about with having consequences. So there's hope for me. I've spent a lot of time with Generation Alpha in just the last couple of months, but I also have substituted in schools quite a bit, and so I interact with them in that space as well. And I will tell you, I have a lot of hope for this generation. I think they're a good generation. They have a lot of good that they're going to bring to this world, and I'm excited to see what it looks like in 10 years.
I just want to add, I think a lot of this is just common sense, right? And I'm proud of Weber School District because the bill that we passed on bathrooms, Weber School District already had a policy in place that was very similar to the bill that had passed. And so we're critical in a lot of areas, but I think in the areas that they're doing a good job, I think we need to point that out too.
So Rod, you kind of introduced my next question. On mental health in our schools, there's a book called Bad Therapy that just came out. And I kind of question if we're going in the right direction in what we're doing. Back in 2020 when the lockdowns and everything else, I did a podcast back then, and I'm not an overly educated person in this area, but I knew, being the mother of 4 kids, this is not a good thing, and it was going to cause some problems. But maybe it was intended to cause those problems. I don't know. But this lowering the standard, and I work with 4 or 5 different counselors that are upset that they feel the standard of being able to practice counseling has been lowered with the bill that was passed last year. And so I want to start there, but also putting so much emphasis on mental health practitioners in our school system. So I'd like you to address that. Is that going in the right direction? I kind of am concerned that maybe that's not.
I don't know anything about the bill that you're talking about, so maybe we can start with someone who does.
So I'm assuming you're talking about the licensing bill, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, the licensing bill that kind of said you don't have to have a master's degree necessarily to practice mental health therapy. So I actually think that's a really good bill, and that doesn't speak to counselors being in schools, but it speaks broadly to, in the criminal justice space especially, we have a lot of need for mental health therapy, and we do not have the pipeline. We do not have the bandwidth within the profession. We simply don't, and there is a lot of need for help with addiction and other problems, and if we want people to stop committing crimes, we need to be able to connect them with the help that they need to be able to make that transition in their life. And without the counselors, without that help, we're not going to get there. So we're still requiring people to go through a process, to be educated, to be able to perform responsibly the requirements to be a mental health therapist. But counseling is one of the few professions that is like it is with pay and other things that requires a master's degree. So
pretty much every state in the union is going this direction. Utah actually let out about 4 or 5 years ago with a module that USU created that was an 18 credit module that said if you have this degree and you do this 18 credit module on top of that, then you can be a counselor in these specific areas. And we also smoothed the pathway between licensing and our higher ed institutions so that that could just smoothly happen and these individuals could get licensed and start working in the mental health profession. So I actually think that's a great bill. When it comes to the introduction of SEL and other kind of fringe theories in our schools, I do think that many of those are problematic, and part of that is, so I ran a bill this year on surveys, and it actually introduced the idea that if you have SEL theories within a survey, then parents have to be able to opt in instead of just opt out, because parents are concerned, and it's a valid concern when their kids are being exposed to these theories and these ideas, and they don't know about it, or they maybe missed the email, and so they didn't opt out. So now they have to actually proactively, affirmatively opt in. That's really important. We need more protections like that for our parents, for our students, to pay attention, to understand what's happening. And a lot of this is happening at a federal level, right? Coming down into our schools with the Federal Department of Education. This isn't something that the Utah State Board thought up one day and said, hey, this would be a really good idea to have in our curriculum and kind of have in our, sprinkled throughout our classroom time for students. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Just to follow up on that, so you're saying going into the criminal justice system, but does this license allow them to practice mental health in any area? I'm assuming that's-
Yes, in any area, but I will tell you the majority of mental health counselors do not practice in K-12 schools.
I'm not a parent myself, but many parents have come to me and talked to me how worried they are about the bullying culture that we see in schools. How do you guys think that we can best address that?
You want me to, I'm going to come back to what I said. We need to hold people accountable for the decisions they make. I remember, again, when I was in elementary, I specifically remember 1 or 2 kids getting suspended for bullying. And so people need to be held accountable. And, I think it seems so simple, but it's the truth. And again, that's why I come back to these are common sense policies that we just need to make sure we're enforcing. And in so many cases, again, there's no consequences for the decisions that we make. And we just have to make sure that people are held accountable and kids are held accountable. And that's the best way you are.
I was just going to say, I agree 100% with what he said. And, there's a big emphasis on restorative justice. And so, a kid can do something outlandish and be back in school the next day. And like he said, I think the kids need to be held accountable for their decisions, for sure.
Yeah, with pertaining to bullying specifically, and this may be a little bit in the weeds, but often it's really hard to recognize the bully, right? Sometimes the bully really gaslights the kid who is blamed for the bullying when they're not the ones who did the bullying, right? Bullies are really good at that. And so it's really hard for a teacher sometimes to really see, okay, who's the one doing the bullying, or the playground monitor to see who's doing the bullying. But when we do know who's doing the bullying, absolutely there has to be accountability. And we've passed as a legislature multiple school safety bills where we've re-empowered our SROs, our law enforcement officers in our schools, to enforce the law in our schools. That was not happening. And as of 2 years ago, the legislation that we passed, that is happening now, and our SROs are empowered to do that, and we will continue to follow up and really look at that landscape and see if there's more that we need to do. We have an ongoing kind of working group that looks at that, and we will continue to do that.
This would be my last question, and Tanner have one more, and then we'll open it up to everyone. There's so many different pockets of funding, and it's like, you know, is there or can we get a list of all the different pockets of funding? Because we have these numbers that are thrown out, and I remember a number of years ago, I tried calculating, it was a lot higher when you calculated your property taxes. We could get taxed at a local level, then we have our income tax, we have multiple different state fundings, and then we have federal fundings. And so is there a way, again, the collaboration, because I know Rod was looking at, you know, where's all the money come from? Is there a way we can y'all can collectively work together that tells us where all the funding is coming from and what those different pockets of funding are spent on?
I think that's a great idea.
So at the state level, we have that. It's on our la.utah.gov website. It's under COBI, C-O-B-I, and you can see how all that funding happens inside on the state level with pie charts and all that stuff. So I think, in fact, the state of Utah has received multiple awards on being the most transparent and having the most transparent website. And so you can see a lot of that. I'm sure it's not perfect, and I'm sure there's probably ways that we could do better. The one thing that I think, Jamie, you haven't talked about is, or that we haven't really looked at, is on the local side. And maybe that's a way where we can look to improve on the local side. About 50% of the funding for schools comes from the local school districts. About 50% comes from the state.
Can I just add on that? What about restricted funds? Are those visible on COBI? Like when the funds get moved for higher education, do you have restricted funds going?
Everything is available on COBI. Now, whether or not you know exactly where to look and what to look under is, but everything should be available on COBI.
I was going to say Cody.
So this next question is going to be a follow-up on the previous. If you guys don't mind, I'll actually turn it over to a member of my precinct who will ask the question. But, Brian, thank you.
Brian from Riverdale 3. You talked about accountability for actions with bullies. Does that follow through to parents, and to what extent? How would you extend that accountability?
That's an easy answer. Again, whether it's in our criminal justice system, whatever it is, people need to be held accountable for their decisions, including parents. It just, you know, now, during COVID, I saw school boards and school districts actually trespass people. That is not okay. And so, you know, but yes, people need to be held accountable for the decisions that they make. And I think, you know, the reasonable person looked at some of the decisions that some of those school boards made in trespassing parents, and in every case that I'm aware of was totally unjustified, and it was flat out wrong. So there's a balance there, but I think, again, let common sense prevail, and you can't trespass somebody for just speaking their mind, right? Maybe they need to be escorted from a meeting, or, you know, if it gets that bad. But for heaven's sakes, you can't trespass them from allowing on any school district property in the school, or sorry, any school property within the school district. But on the flip side of that, again, and Representative Lisonbee and I have worked really close on a lot of the criminal justice stuff, and that does, to me, and again, it's more of a societal issue, and not holding people accountable for their decisions. So whether that's at the school board level or whether that's at the criminal justice level, yes, parents need to be held accountable.
Did you have any more questions, Tanner? Can we open it
No,
up?
we can just do Q&A for about 15 minutes.
I have a question that goes along with that. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm a teacher, and I'm in Layton District 43, but I'm an elementary school teacher, and I love my friend over there. She's also a teacher. We're saying, yes, be held accountable, but I don't know who to ask, but how We're told you can't do anything. If you want to keep them in from recess, 1 minute would be acceptable. 1 minute? It takes people longer than that to put their coat on. I mean, we just don't know what to do, and we don't know where to turn. And we don't get the support from parents that we need or our administrators. Do you have any suggestions?
That's an excellent question. Okay. So we did a survey recently, and teachers responded that their #1 concern was classroom behavior. It's a legitimate concern, and it's something that we have passed multiple bills to try to address. We had one this year that was trying to get at those really problem behaviors in the classroom where a whole classroom is disrupted because one child is throwing a fit or behaving erratically. And so that bill actually ended up not passing, but we are committed to continue to try to find the right policy. And we would just ask you, please help us as well. Please communicate with us what you think would work. We're trying to get there. Sometimes we don't have the experience necessary to really understand that. My cell phone is online. I know Speaker Shultz would be happy to take a call or an email, but please also communicate with us and tell us what you're seeing and what you think we could do to help.
That bill that you were talking about, is that shortening the amount of time that we have to watch their behavior before we can get them out of the regular classroom? Is that what your bill was that didn't pass?
It was requiring the child to be removed, not the whole classroom. So it was flipping the conversation or the narrative from, instead of allowing that one child to disrupt, removing the disruption and allowing the classroom to continue. And it was trying to get at that, and the nuts and bolts I think we were just hung up on. I really think it had a good chance of passing. It just didn't this year, but I know it will be brought back next year, and I would love to have those conversations.
So first off, thank you for being a teacher. Thank you for being in the classroom. Thank you for being one of the good teachers. You can tell you care and you're passionate. Here's my thoughts and my opinions on it. We have the school boards, the school districts, the principals, the administrators have the tools they need to hold kids accountable. They just need to do it. And as I've had the opportunity to go around and talk to schools and teachers, I'm finding that many administrators are, and many are not. And so I really would hope, and this is why I'm supporting Rob, because you can tell he's a big burly guy, and he says things in a really nice way, but he's to the point, and he holds people accountable, and I think that's having school boards, having administrators that hold kids accountable, I think is the best way forward. Because I've heard both sides as I've talked to teachers. Some administrators hold back the teachers and help hold the kids accountable, and others don't. So I think really we have enough tools in place, and we'll continue to work to make sure that we do, and if we need to make changes, like Representative Lisonbee said, I think that bill that was talked about is a good bill, but really we need the local districts and the school boards to act.
Senate Bill 159 broke down components. It was Buxton's bill that would assist with that. It was a pilot program, but it's awesome. Just an FYI.
Yeah, have your school sign on to that pilot, or is it already all?
No, it's not.
Yeah, so talk to your administrators.
159 Senate Bill by Buxton.
Yeah, that was a good help.
It was a phenomenal bill.
I think a lot of what she's speaking to as well is we have the DOJ, Davis County Schools.
It's out of control.
And it's out of control. They're overseeing things on a different level. So a lot of teachers are walking around on eggshells, administrators on eggshells because they don't know how to handle the situation. I'll just give you an example. There was a kid that had an outburst in my son's school, Syracuse High School, threw stuff, broke stuff, cussed the teacher out, walked out of the classroom, and my son came home and told me about it, and I said, well, he'll be back in school tomorrow. He goes, no, he won't, because he went to the office, and sure enough, he's back in school the next day. I guarantee that's some sort of a restorative justice move through the DOJ. So that's an issue that's bigger, that prayerfully will get resolved sooner than later. Yeah.
So Chuck Bickle, District, District 14, Precinct 7. I don't know how much information went there. Anyway, when I first moved to this state, one of the things that broke my heart, and it really, really bothered me, was our teen suicide rate. As a church, we've spent about $20,000 bringing in a top-notch speaker that has filled gymnasiums. Last time we brought him in, he spoke in front of 10,000 kids, 2,300 of them. So while he's speaking, he says, if you want to text me, here's my number. They listened well enough to write his number down, and 2,300 of them said, you saved my life. I was going to kill myself, but I know how to help my friend who wanted to kill himself. And guess what? So I got a couple of things. One, what can we do? Something's wrong. Our school administrators do not have the authority, they do not feel comfortable even making a decision to bring this guy back into their schools when we're paying for it. When I promise you, nobody's ever had an effect like this guy had. That's really wrong. Secondly, because of our heart to do something about it, I got called into a meeting with the two people at the state level that are responsible to reduce suicide with teenagers, and I said, well, what do you think one of the reasons that they're killing themselves? Well, because of bullying. I said, okay, let me ask you a question. What are you doing to empower the good kid to stop the bad kid and without punishing the good kid? We got things so messed up. If one of my boys is protecting a girl, he's not getting in trouble when he comes home. I don't care what the principal says. We got to get back to common sense and what can be done to free up the principal to say, hey, I think if this, I know what happened last time this guy was in town. I'm going to risk it. What are you risking? He's afraid of what? Afraid of the state school board or the county school board coming down on him. At the high school level, every one of these assemblies was volunteer. It was during their lunch break. And the gyms were so full, they had to fill the tracks above, and you could hear a pin drop. And we can't get the guy back because the principals are afraid they're going to get fired. We got to change some things. I want to hear what you think we could do to make a difference there on those two things.
Well, I know, I'll tell you something. About 5 years ago, God laid on my heart a solution for our young people. And this is, you're going to think I'm going off track, but I'm not. About 80% of young people were walking away from church after they graduate from high school. And so this is a church illustration here. But I said that just can't be okay. And so my wife and I've always been a youth pastor, so 7th through 12th grade, we stepped in and we decided we would fill that gap. We would help them with the transition from 12th grade into college and career. And I cannot tell you guys how amazing that has been walking through the process. So I told y'all that to tell you this, that God has laid on my heart, the way that we fix this is through parental involvement. I know that we're all sitting back thinking, we're not going to be able to, but let me tell you what, He's laid on my heart, the way that we fix this is through parental involvement. I think we have all the right players in this game. I believe that we do. I think it's a matter of us putting our hearts and our minds together and leading forward with some sort of a statewide initiative that would challenge parents to step back into the arena of being plugged into their kids' lives and being plugged into their kids' schools. And I believe with all my heart, this is the solution. I don't think things get turned around without it. And so that's where our focal point needs to be, at encouraging parents to step in and to get involved. And I promise you, just these little seeds that we're sowing even right here, parents are doing it. They're beginning to step up and step in and get involved. And that's just a little taste. I think there's so much more to come. So
I agree with a lot of what Rod just said. But part of the reason why we're seeing such high suicide rates, and by the way, the trend has turned in the state of Utah, and we're actually not the lowest anymore. We've actually turned that curve harder than any other state has. But I also think, well, I don't think, I know, part of the problem is we're coddling our kids too young and we're not teaching them life lessons. And so as they grow into their teenage years, they're not knowing how to deal with their problems and their issues. So again, it comes back to teaching our kids the accountability, and it needs to happen. First, if it's not happening at the parent level, then it needs to happen as well at the school level, or to the best that it can, but just holding the kids accountable. But who remembers the campaign of the 90s? with the, this is your brain on drugs, and it's fallen in the, you remember that, right? I'll tell you, it scared the heck out of me, and I don't do drugs. I never done drugs because of that, okay? It worked. So this is something Representative Webb has to build this year, and it's to do a campaign similar to that, and this is similar to what Rob talked about. Parents, put your phone down. Get involved in your kid's life. I feel like I'm a pretty decent dad. I said pretty decent. My wife would argue, okay? But even she has to tell me, Mike, put your phone down and be involved. And it's like, bam, okay. It clicked. I'm like, you're right. I didn't even see it and recognize it. And so we're going to run a pilot program this year that's similar to that. It started this year. We'll roll out over the next year. That's kind of like, hey, parents, put your phone down, get involved in your kid's life. And I hope to expand it similar to that ad in the 90s and the DARE, don't do drugs ad. I think that's a good one.
The 80s and 90s were a great time. I will say one of the things I think that maybe hasn't been said but is important to recognize is we also need to be involved in our school boards at the local level. We need to be going and commenting and urging, because some of the fear amongst those local administrators is because of repercussions that are potentially going to come from the school board, not from the state legislature. And so I think that's really important. We have to have those conversations as well with our school boards. We want to have these speakers in. We want to have them affect our kids. Why isn't that happening? The state has indemnified every teacher and every principal, so it's not an issue of I'm afraid I'm going to get sued, right? There's something else going on there. And so I would just urge everybody, there's not a lot of people that go to local school board meetings, and I know they get lonely, and they'd love to hear from you. So maybe try going.
That's a great leeway, because I now going, man, Weaver School District, they've been really great. They're really receptive. So I love that you said that. Okay, so, man, I got so many things, but okay. With all the mental health talk, some of my questions were with that too. Maybe at some point, Karianne, I would love to hear, I actually am a proponent of social emotional learning, and maybe I don't understand it then quickly, your hesitations or other people's hesitations with it. But when we're talking about, you guys are right, teachers hate the behaviors going on. They hate it. And I get it. One of the things I've been looking into is what about all of the preventative work instead of reacting to kids? Why don't we, so for me, social emotional learning or teaching coping skills and all that seems to actually fit hand in hand with teaching kids over time, that grit and ways to deal when we have hard things come up. I will just share also, and this is a personal issue, and why I feel strongly about these type of things is because of my own family and the impact mental health has had on my family. I have an 8-year-old who, I'm not looking for pity, and it just sometimes makes me emotional. I'm so sorry. As a 4-year-old, we noticed some big issues of, finally got her in therapy as a 5-year-old. She was beating up on us as parents, her younger sister. I mean, if my kid didn't have access to mental health resources in my family, she could be one of those kids at the school, clearing a room. I've done, so we've done cognitive behavioral therapy. I've done parent-child interaction therapy, learning how to deal with someone who has the challenges she has. I then, after all of the experiences we've had with her, and I had a 3rd child, found myself severely depressed, didn't know it, had suicidal thoughts myself. Thankfully, got help through therapy and medication, and now, man, I'm, some days are good, some days are bad, but rocking and rolling more, surviving more days than just trying to make it through, thriving more than just surviving. I've read, there's a book called The Violence Project about the epidemic of mass shootings and the things that these humans, usually males, that have gone through and shot up places, have a lot of trauma from their past. There's so many things. But to me then, I'm wondering a lot in the schools, these kids who are interrupting, who are having a hard time, I'm sorry, I got a lot of evidence though. I've done a lot of research. Again, parenting has completely kicked my trash. There's a big psychologist, behavior is a window. Kids who are acting out, there's a reason. So for me, we need to do something about the behavior, but what about what's underneath the behavior and why are they acting out that way? Like, how can we, you know what I'm saying? I found a collaborative through the U that we're trying to put in our school to address all of these layers of need. So that's some of my thoughts, is like, how can we get that? Really quick though, if you guys, I would love, I'm Speaker Shultz, I'm in your district, would love to be able to meet and bring some of my ideas, if there's a way to do that. And then also I just know with the new something bill, that's like, normally I think our income taxes pay for education, and maybe that's not gonna be the case. That seems concerning potentially. I would love even more funding for education, possibly mental health. All right, sorry, I'm done.
Okay, great. Well, I'll just address some of the concerns that you raised. So CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, is actually one of the best evidence-based programs that there is out there. That's not SEL, right? That's different. And I'd be happy to chat with you offline about some concerns there. And I will say on the school shooter question, I think it's really interesting that the Texas shooter and the Florida shooter, Parkland, both had multiple brushes with law enforcement, and they could have and should have been detained. And my whole point to having those mental health therapists there and available in the criminal justice system is because that's the whole goal, right? Is connecting them in a space where they have to listen, they have to be involved and engaged, to get the help that they need to make a change in their life. And in juvenile justice, they use CBT all the time. It works. So I think we agree more than we disagree, because having those individuals arrested, detained, and get the help that they need would have prevented massive loss of life, of young people that would still be alive and still be contributing and aren't, because their lives were ended by a shooter who could have been stopped. So I think that's just really important, and I appreciate you raising those points. And again, I'm really sorry for the struggles you've gone through. Parenthood is difficult. I know you're not looking for pity. I get it. I've raised 6 kids. My youngest just got set apart to go on a mission on Sunday, so I hear you. Like, my nest is pretty empty right now, and it's feeling really different. But I'm grateful for the lessons that I've learned as a parent. I know it really makes us better people.
Thank you, Representative Lisonbee. Come see me after, and we'll connect. And I'll give you my number. We can get together for sure. So I'll address the funding side. So the last several years, the legislature has been trying to figure out how to take sales tax off of food. Because of the constraints inside the budget, and I'm not going to get into the details because it's super complicated and a little bit wonky, so just high level. In order to take the sales tax off of food and cut taxes there, we have to create some flexibility inside the budget. So that's what happens in November if it passes at the ballot box. It's not 100% accurate that all income tax goes towards education. And there's no guarantees that the money goes towards education. So it shouldn't matter where the money comes from as long as the money makes it to education. I think that's the biggest thing. Don't get hung up on where the money comes, just make sure the money gets there. That's, I think, probably the this thing and to summarize it, and I'm happy to go into more detail.
I'm going to interject for a minute. We're going to continue on with the questioning. Just know that we're going to have some candidates coming in, hopefully, and setting up tables. So if y'all are okay with a little disruption in this question, I want to thank Rod for coming, and Speaker Shultz and Representative Lisonbee for coming. And you know, they're busy people, so I appreciate them taking this time to allow us to have this conversation. So we'll just continue with the questions until Tanner tells us we can't. But we're going to let people set up their tables in the meantime.
And Rob said we'll keep our answers short.
And real quick, if you guys wouldn't mind, library staff also has to take down the chairs in a second, so let's do a speed round. So, thank you.
I'll try. My name is Chuck, I'm from District 7. I'll tie this back in to local things, I'll try. You know, on a federal level, we have laws and policies and procedures that are passed every day that make tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people, criminals overnight. They don't even know it, right? Might be a Second Amendment issue, might be another issue. I want to know how these things happen. How do we get a school in any state, but I live in Utah, so that's what I'm concerned about, that has these crazy rules, these crazy things that are going on. You know, most people are involved to some level with their kids. They want to be involved, but, you know, a lot of other things going on in life. How do these things get in place without the people knowing? Why aren't the school boards required to push to the people, to the parents, what's going on in the schools? Curriculums, they want to hide all this stuff. That's what needs to change. I think that information, if there are changes happening in our schools that we need to know about, there should be legislation. And I'm not a big fan of legislation. I think we have too much. But there needs to be some legislation to push that information forward so I know what's going on in my local school. And I don't have to be responsible necessarily to go to every school board meeting or go dig that information out. And that's what I hear sometimes. So you parents, you know, you just need to dig more and get involved more and get that information out. They want to hide it. They make it very difficult. We need to have that information. I sure don't have any problem getting information pushed to me on my phone, you know, for anything. That information needs to be pushed forward so that we as parents know what is going on in our state with our schools and our kids, instead of them coming home and saying, I have to make a report on this. And I go, no, you're not making a report on that. And that's not the way it should happen. So I want some input on how you think we can push that to the people so that people understand what's going on.
Well, I definitely think there needs to be more transparency. State school board, county school boards, you know, on the way here, I was looking at bills that was passed in the session, and I got a chance to go through and look and see how everybody voted, how they voted, who voted no, who voted yes. Full transparency. I would just challenge you to go to the USBE and try to do that. Try to find out what they're voting on, try to find out who voted what. You're going to spend hundreds of hours trying to watch video to find that out. So I think the same transparency that we have with our legislative needs to be in the state school boards and the county school boards. Then it needs to be sent out. People need to know these are the issues that are coming up in school boards, and this is what's going on state and at the county level too as well.
And I'll keep it quick. You're spot on. It's like whack-a-mole. That's where the majority of these bills come from, is to try to curb some of these things that are out there in regards to education. And so again, the locals need to do, they need to be more involved. They need to be more transparent. 100% agree.
Yeah, and I think part of that, and it's important to elect good people, right? I've worked with good people on the local school board in Davis District who want to be more transparent. And they were voted down in their meeting to have more public comment because the people on the school board, the majority, wanted to have a 1-hour meeting so they could only allow 6 people to talk for 3 minutes, and they wanted that in their rule. Now, I served on I served on a city council before I was in the legislature, and I stayed until I motioned to stay until 1 a.m.
to hear every citizen's concerns about a tax increase. I did that multiple times, right? But our school boards, our local school boards can't be bothered to stay more than 1 hour to hear concerns from parents. So I think it's really important that we elect good people who want to provide more transparency as well. I know it's hard. I know it's hard to be involved. I get that. You're right. There is a lack of transparency, also a massive lack of common sense, to Pastor Bickle's point. I mean, what is going on in our country, right? But I think we can get back to restoring that common sense and to having the transparency that's so important. I would love to see more of that. We've worked on bills to require that public comment. There were local districts that didn't even want to have any public comment, and we passed a bill that said you have to. So, I mean, we're working on it. We agree, but do keep in touch. We want to hear your ideas. I think that's a really good one.
Real quick, we just want to keep the questions to about 60 seconds. Anthony will be timing, and he'll give you guys a heads up on when you're running out of time.
My question is pretty quick. My wife is an elementary school teacher in Weaver School District. I have a sister that is an English teacher in Salt Lake School District. And, you know, we talked a lot about what we think is wrong with education right now. And a lot of it is coming from outside of Utah. And so I was looking at the Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, and I don't see anywhere in the enumerated powers where the federal government has any right, or where we've given them any right whatsoever to be involved in education. So how can you, as the state board and legislature, fight back against these mandates that are coming from Washington as well? And by the way, a lot of the problems, and I talked to my sister, are coming from new teachers that are coming out of our schools of education at the U and at other places. So what can we do to fight back against unconstitutional?
Yeah. You're singing my tune right there. That is, we stand up and we say we're done. The 10th Amendment means something. We passed the SB 57 this year. That is the State Sovereignty Act, first state in the nation to do it. But we have to start standing up and saying we're done and pushing back and saying no. We are committed at that right now. As your Speaker of the House, that is my #1 priority.
So if you take federal dollars, are you saying we're not taking them, or we are taking them?
In some cases, we need to say, no, we're not taking them, if that's what it is, absolutely.
So I was actually going to touch on that because that is a really important point. First of all, I'll just say we did pass an expansion bill for the alternative pathway for teachers, which helps with the concern about our teacher colleges and some of the training that's happening there, that teachers can become teachers because they're experts in the community or because they're a really good teacher and they have a proficiency. So that's important. But on the point of federal dollars, it's really important. You probably don't know that our local districts take over $600 million a year from the federal government, and every single dollar has a string attached. I guarantee it does. And our local districts need to also start saying no. It goes back to my point about we need to elect good people. We've also talked extensively at the legislative level about weaning our state board off of the federal dollars they take, which is about $180 million at the state board level. And saying, you know, in 5 years, we're not taking any more money, so extricate yourselves from that funding. That's some of the conversations we're having. It would require legislation. It would require legislation that passed, and a lot of people really like federal dollars. We have done some studies that have analyzed, okay, is the juice worth the squeeze on this federal money? And we've been able to extricate ourselves from some of those funds because the juice simply isn't worth the squeeze in Utah. And so that has helped, but still, like I said, that's almost $1 billion that we're taking from the federal government every year in education in Utah.
All right. Our state party has elected to use the caucus convention method for selecting our candidates. The state permits the gathering of signatures to bypass the local party and circumvent our precinct representatives in their elected duty. How are you working to legislate the recognition of only the convention-nominated candidates? And have you put all your faith in the caucus system, or have you gathered signatures?
No, I haven't gathered signatures. My opponent did, though.
So our legislature passed SB 54 before I was there. I am a huge fan and supporter of the caucus system. Those of you that have seen me work, I have several of you in this room I've had 3 or 4 individual meetings with. I am committed 100% to the caucus system. I voted, I think, 4 or 5 times to repeal SB 54 and go back directly to the caucus system. Most legislators or a lot of candidates are doing the dual path. So I did choose the dual path this year, but I will not bypass the caucus system. There's a reason I'm here tonight. There's a reason I'm willing to sit down and speak with every one of you and spend whatever time necessary to address as many concerns, because the caucus system's important in Utah. I think that's what has kept Utah and set Utah aside and made it different than so many other states. And it's important to me that we restore that.
So for the first time ever, I don't have an opponent this year, but I love the caucus system too, and I went and knocked on every delegate's door and had a conversation with the delegates about their concerns, because it's more than just about getting elected. It's about being accountable. And what better process to be accountable to people who are interested and informed. So I think the caucus system is really important. I too have voted to repeal it many times. The House really likes repealing it. Other people don't. So it's still in place. I have collected signatures once in an election. I did every single signature myself. I didn't hire it out and I didn't pay anybody to do it, and it was hard. I mean, I had volunteers help me as well, but it was a lot of work. But it was also great to have those conversations. And then just the last point that I wanted to make, our caucus system keeps Utah free.
Right.
Please spread the word. Please tell your neighbors in states of similar size that have direct primaries. It can cost somebody running for a seat like ours $500,000 easy. We can run an election. I can run an election for under $2,000 with the caucus system. It is so important that we remain accountable to you and not to big money interests.
Right.